Same way they hate the idea of religious faith because both are a challenge to their power. That's one of the main reasons they despise Viktor Orbán, the Prime Minister of Hungary, whose pro-family policies are the most comprehensive in the world. Because of those policies, we went to see Orbán last summer, and here's how he described to us what he's doing in Hungary.
What is going on here is building up a society which is very successful. Economically, politically, culturally, even in demography, we have some success, family policy. So what you can see here could be described as a success story. But the fundamentals of this success are totally different than it is wished and run and created by many other Western countries. So the Western liberals cannot accept that inside the Western civilization there is a conservative national alternative which is more successful at the everyday life, at the level of than the liberal ones.
A world leader who reads books and talks like it. So he's essentially arguing that Hungary is hated by the leaders of other countries because the contrast is so stark. Hungary is conservative. And let's be clear what we mean by conservative. Hungary is conservative in pretty much exactly the same way the United States was conservative in 1998. Not old-fashioned repressive conservative, whatever that is, but just sort of normal people conservative. The conservative you remember very well before the lunatics took over. So Hungary has stayed that course thanks to the man you just saw. And as a result, it has turned out to be much more successful, by which we mean much more stable and much happier than most of the liberal countries that surround it. That's true. And that's why they hate Viktor Orbán so much. He is a living rebuke to their ideas. And yet, and this is our second piece of good news tonight, Viktor Orbán was reelected yesterday for the fourth time in an electoral landslide. In his speech, Orbán described the victory as a win for sensible nationalism, which it certainly is, as well as a rebuke to, quote, the left at home, the international left, the Brussels bureaucrats, the Soros empire with all of its money, the international mainstream media, and in the end, even the president of Ukraine. We should tell you all of those forces and people bitterly opposed Viktor Orbán's re-election. And you can see why. He does the one thing you're never allowed to do. Orbán says the obvious things out loud. Last summer, for example, he told us that in order to protect families, you first have to secure your national borders. Watch.
If somebody, without getting any permission on behalf of the Hungarian state, cross your border, you have to defend your country and to say, guys, stop. And if you would like to cross or you would like to come, there's a legal procedure. We have to do it. But you can't cross, without any kind of limitation and permission and any contribution and control of the Hungarian state. It's dangerous. You have to defend your people against any danger.
And you think you have a right to do that?
Of course. It's coming from the God, the nature, so all arguments with us. Because this is our country, this is our population, this is our history, this is our language, so we have to do that. Of course, if you are in trouble and there is nobody closer to you than the Hungarians, you have to...
History, tradition, language. Find 5 people who are against those things. The only people who are against those things are people who hate the idea of countries, who would like to eliminate all distinctions between countries because that would make them more powerful. But take 3 steps back. So you just watched a guy who runs a nation of 10 million people in Central Europe. And he's got a slightly different, not a radically different, but a slightly different way of doing things. Why is it so threatening that he's running a country that looks like America in 1998? Why are they so mad about that? Because it's a challenge to their monopoly. They're mad at him for the same reason. Very soon they will be every bit as mad at Elon Musk. He's challenging their monopoly. And their monopoly power is the only advantage they have. If there's competition in the marketplace, they lose because their products are terrible. So immediately, you won't be surprised to learn this, our media set out to slander Viktor Orbán. Must stop Orbán! In the name of democracy, a guy who just got elected. So CNN today reported that, quote, Viktor Orbán, Hungary's authoritarian leader and key Putin ally, calls Zelensky an opponent after winning re-election. None of that's true, by the way, except the last line. But they don't even explain it. It's just prima facie. He's terrible. He criticized someone you're not allowed to criticize. So he's a Putin stooge. So a couple questions here. No one in Hungary is pro-Russian, by the way. Almost all Hungarian energy comes from Russia. So probably best not to pick a fight with Russia, which is much bigger than Hungary, multiples of the size of Hungary. But in what sense is he a Putin stooge? Orban was one of the very first leaders in Europe to denounce the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Oh, that wasn't in the CNN piece. And by the way, how is it that an authoritarian just won a landslide in a nationwide election? Why is Viktor Orbán an authoritarian, a proto-fascist, and not just an unusually popular prime minister who got elected for the fourth time? So to answer that question, Orbán's critics have to make stuff up. EU officials, for example, are reportedly upset, and this is the greatest quote ever, quote, that Mr. Orbán has used his majority in parliament to rewrite election laws, redraw voting districts, and permit mail-in ballots without identity verification. So it turns out if you're an authoritarian, you might let people vote by mail, and that cannot be allowed in Hungary. He's an authoritarian for doing that. Unbelievable. Now, Jason Stanley, a confirmed non-genius who apparently teaches at Yale University, offered this assessment, which is equally hilarious. Savor this, quote, Hungary shows that if you control the education system, the media, and the courts, you can rule forever, enriching your family and friends. Oh, really? What's interesting is that media in Hungary are far less controlled by one party than they are in the United States. There's much more diversity of view allowed in Hungary than in the United States. Much more. Just count the publications and their partisan affiliation, and you will see it's much more diverse in Hungary. So there's not a lot of self-awareness on display ever on the left, but particularly not today on the subject of Viktor Orbán. A senior correspondent at Vox offered this assessment on Twitter, quote, for the whole country to be dumbed down by propaganda, it's crazy. They literally brainwash people. In the countryside, they just repeat the state media's stock lies. There are only a handful of independent media outlets, and they are hard to find. It's just too great. They're always talking